Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa for your latest news roundup from across the continent. I'm Joy-Emile Jamin here with your top stories of the day. Kenyan President William Ruto arrives in Beijing for a 5-day state visit at the invitation of Chinese President Xi Jinping. The pair will seek to highlight key projects like the railway Lamu Port and Mombasa Terminal as bilateral ties strengthened, filling the vacuum of those between Nairobi and Washington. Then in a bold move, Uganda's army chief meets DR Congo's CODECO militia near Kampala, urging peace after deadly clashes. It's an initiative said to be aimed at changing Uganda's image from war player to peace broker in the eastern DRC. And opposition leader Tidjane Thiam vows to stay in the Ivorian presidential race after a court bars him over his former French nationality. The 62-year-old says his PDCI party won't name a backup candidate and warns that political exclusion could risk a return to unrest in the post-conflict nation. Welcome to the show. President William Ruto touched down in Beijing on Tuesday, kicking off a 5-day visit aimed at deepening Kenya's growing ties with China. Since 2013, Beijing has poured billions into Kenyan infrastructure, reshaping its economic landscape. Now Ruto is turning that partnership into political momentum, pushing not only for deeper cooperation, but also for a permanent African seat on the UN Security Council. The visit also signals Kenya's shifting focus away from the West and towards China's rising global influence. Olivia Bizo reports.
On Tuesday, Kenya's President William Ruto arrived in Beijing for talks aimed at increasing investment and trade. China is already Kenya's biggest lender. They've funded massive road, railway and power projects. Ruto is hoping to expand that partnership, especially in the manufacturing and digital infrastructure sectors. But this trip is not just about business. Ruto is also hoping to push for Africa's permanent seat at the UN Security Council. He says that the current system is outdated and that Africa deserves a stronger voice in global decision-making. China has said that it supports reform, so Ruto is hoping to turn that support into action. While this trip does suggest a tilt towards Beijing, Ruto definitely emphasised that he is not taking sides. In a speech that he gave this Wednesday, he says that Kenya is neither facing east or west, but it's facing forwards. He also emphasised that he wants Kenya to serve as a bridge between East and West. Relations with the US do still remain strong, but it looks like Ruto will increasingly be prioritising his relations with Beijing as investments do come a lot faster and there's a lot less political instability, especially since US President Donald Trump came to power. So overall, this trip will be an opportunity for President Ruto to bring home some deals and definitely boost his image as a continental leader.
We turn our attention now to Uganda, where the country's army chief on Tuesday met near Kampala with leaders of the CODECO, a militia from northeastern DR Congo, just weeks after deadly clashes between the two sides. Kampala says it's seeking stability amidst the nearby M23 conflict with the Congolese army. Analysts, though, suggest the move is part of a broader strategy to reshape regional influence and possibly entice other rebel groups like the ADF to lay down arms. Juliette Montilly reports from the region.
Posting on X, Uganda's army chief held a meeting with representatives of CODECO, a Congolese militia that opposes the government in Kinshasa. Just last month, fighting between CODECO and Ugandan forces in Ituri in eastern DRC had left hundreds dead, according to multiple sources. A Ugandan statement described the meeting as an important step towards regional peace, and Kampala is now encouraging CODECO to join forces with its army to, quote, support stability in eastern Congo. But in fact, this possible alliance with a group hostile to Kinshasa is raising serious questions. Uganda has maintained a military presence in DRC for years, notably fighting alongside Kinshasa since 2021 against ADF rebels, a group linked to the Islamic State. Still, it has been accused in the past of seeking to destabilize its neighbor. Observers say its role remains unclear unclear as it stays relatively quiet on the roundup-backed M22 offensive, shaking the Kivu provinces, and particularly as Uganda boosted troop numbers in the Ituri region in recent months, an area rich in gold and crucial to cross-border trade. A complex web of alliances then, but President Museveni always insisted that every action in the region was done with Kinshasa's approval.
On Tuesday, we brought you the news that Ivory Coast opposition leader Tidjane Thiam was ineligible to run in October's presidential election. That's after courts cited his past French nationality, striking him off the roll, saying candidates must be solely Ivorian citizens. Thiam's party, PDCI, has decided not to field an alternative candidate. And the former Credit Suisse CEO has this Wednesday responded. He says he'll be challenging the decision and that he won't back down. Here he is.
Africans need to have the right and the possibility to choose freely who should lead them. That's all we're asking for. And if people think I was away too long, or whatever, they can express that in the ballot box. Okay? For now, I'm leading in the polls. It's not for the government to decide who runs opposition parties or who gets to run against them, and that's what we're trying to do. And I really want the same criteria and demands to be put on Africa as any other part of the world. I don't accept the shrugging and saying this is Africa. I've been getting calls, well, what did you expect? Of course, they were going to block you through dubious means, but I want Africa to be respected, and I'm going to fight so that that type of governance disappears.
There's been an historic handshake in Antananarivo. French President Emmanuel Macron touched down in Madagascar, marking the first official visit by a French head of state in 2 decades. At the heart of the visit, a deal to build a long-delayed hydroelectric dam in Volob, backed by France's development agency and treasury loans. French energy giant EDF is also expected to join Madagascar's hydroelectric company, further cementing economic ties. But not everything is forward-looking. Macron faces pressure over France's continued control of the scattered islands, a colonial-era holdover contested by Madagascar, and plans to return the skull of King Toera, beheaded by French troops back in 1897, have been shelved, highlighting unresolved historical wounds and calls for deeper reckoning with France's colonial past. Moving on, and Tunisian lawyer and outspoken government critic Ahmed Souab has been detained under anti-terrorism laws, sparking protests across Tunis. Souab, who defended opposition leaders recently, jailed on conspiracy charges, called the judiciary a farce and accused judges of working under political pressure. Authorities interpreted his remarks as threats. Rights groups and political parties have condemned the arrest as a dangerous escalation in President Kais Saied's crackdown on dissent. Souab's legal team are said to have boycotted his hearing after most were barred from defending him, calling the trial politically motivated. Tensions over Tunisia's democracy continue to rise. Staying in the country, a week after a deadly school wall collapse killed 3 in Mezzouna, calm has returned, but questions and heartache remain in Tunisia. President Kais Saied's visit on Friday appeared to have eased those tensions, yet locals are waiting for real change and for his promise to materialize. The tragedy has highlighted deeper issues of neglect in Tunisia's marginalized towns. Our correspondents Lilia Blaise and Hamdi Tlili report from a community caught between grief and hope.
In front of the house of Abdelkader Dhibi, one of 3 high school students who died when the wall of their school collapsed on April 14th, neighbors continued to visit the family in mourning. Ayub was one of his classmates.
We used to help each other with homework. We always hung out together. When I arrived in town on Monday and saw black smoke everywhere, locals burning tires, and the protests, that's when I realized he was really dead.
Abdelkader's family want to bring those responsible to justice.
There had been a problem with that wall for years, but unfortunately it collapsed on that day and killed my brother and his classmates.
President Kais Saied visited them a few days after the tragedy and promised to solve infrastructure problems.
I have trust. For 40 years we had no access to drinking water, and now we got it in one day after the president's visit.
But in the town, residents expect more. The school principal had warned of the bad state of the wall several times in the past. In this cafe facing the scene of the tragedy, this waiter saw everything.
Whenever clients parked in front of it, I told them it was better not to do so because it was dangerous. So we need to determine who is responsible in this matter. There was some carelessness from the authorities.
An investigation has been opened. The president also promised to improve the town's economy. This resident remains skeptical because many previously promised projects never materialized.
Here, you're in front of what was supposed to be a cement factory. The project was planned since 2011. It was launched with great fanfare in 2026, and since then, nothing. Look.
Around town, the word danger has now been written on several walls that have cracks. It's a reminder of the problems of underdevelopment which continue to plague a town just a few kilometers away from Sidi Bouzid, the birthplace of the 2011 revolution.
In Nairobi this Wednesday, a Kenyan court heard the case of two Belgian teenagers arrested earlier this month for trafficking thousands of rare ants, valued at over $9,000. Lognoy David and Sep Lodovic, both 19, were caught with 5,000 ants, including a species native to East Africa. Authorities say the insects were destined for illegal pet markets in Europe and Asia. The Kenya Wildlife Service has called this case part of a disturbing new trend, the trafficking of lesser-known but ecologically critical species. The teens claim they didn't realize they were breaking the law and were simply having fun. The lawyer hopes this Belgian embassy can help in the judicial process before they return to court in 2 weeks for sentencing. And finally, we go to South Africa, where Lebo M, the artist behind the Lion King soundtrack, began performing at just 9 in Johannesburg nightclubs. He's now 60 years old, and he's back in Cape Town for his first solo show, aiming to inspire the next generation of South African talent. Joining him are his daughter, Hans Zimmer, and some of the country's top performers. Tom Canetti and Stefan Carstens spoke to the man behind the music legend.
The voice known around the world. Lebo M returns home for his first solo show. Before all of the glitz and glamour, a young Lebohang Marake sung in the nightclubs of Soweto during apartheid.
I never knew there was something like Cape Town or anything else other than I grew up in Soweto, and that's all I knew. I learned from childhood that what I do touches people emotionally and inspires. And what I didn't know as a kid until I grew up and became a professional and created opportunity for other people to follow suit, I learned that because other people gave me a helping hand through life.
Now, Lebo is giving back, focusing on mentoring the next generation of artists. Among them, Kawela Tebza, an ensemble also born on the streets of Soweto.
Someone like Lebo has been a mentor and someone to look up to, and someone that gives us that hope as an African child or as a young boy born in Soweto.
Finally, it's showtime, and in attendance is longtime friend and special guest Hans Zimmer.
And really, we started out as partners, you know, and he was my tour guide through South African music.
A sold-out show packed with South African talent. Plenty of classics, and performances from Lebo's daughter. And of course, his old friend Hans.
I got a German guy in Soweto to make music.
Lebohang Marake, please keep on spreading your melody around the world. That's it from Eye on Africa. There's more news coming up on France 24. Please stay tuned.